Animal life, mass extinctions, dinosaurs and mammals. Circa 538.8 million to 7 million years ago. Section 1. The seas come alive. Around 538.8 million years ago, Earth entered one of the most dramatic chapters in the history of life. The world was still nothing like the one we know today. There were no forests, no birdsong, no dinosaurs, no mammals, no humans. Life was still mostly a story of the oceans. For billions of years before this, life had been dominated by microbes. Then complex cells appeared. Multicellular life expanded. Strange ediacaran organisms spread across ancient seafloors. And now, at the beginning of the Cambrian period, animal life became more active, more visible, and more diverse than ever before. This was the Cambrian evolutionary radiation. It is often called the Cambrian explosion. But it was not an explosion in a single instant. Animals did not suddenly appear from nowhere. The roots of this transformation reached back into the Ediacaran period. But during the Cambrian, animal ecosystems changed with extraordinary force. The oceans filled with new forms: predators, burrowers, swimmers, crawlers, filter feeders, armored bodies, jointed limbs, eyes, spines, shells, skeletons. For the first time, the fossil record shows a world where animal life was becoming intensely interactive. This was no longer a quiet seafloor covered only by microbial mats and soft-bodied organisms. This was a world of pursuit and defense, a world where some animals hunted and others evolved armor, a world where bodies became tools. Trilobites crawled across the seafloor, sponges filtered seawater, brachiopods anchored themselves in marine environments. Mollusks began expanding into new ecological roles. Priapulid worms burrowed through sediment. Early echinoderms appeared. Early chordate-like animals carried the distant beginnings of the lineage that would one day produce vertebrates, and above them moved strange predators. Among the most famous was Anomalocaris, a radiodont predator with grasping appendages and a circular mouth unlike anything familiar today. There were also creatures that looked almost alien to modern eyes. Opabinia, with its 5 eyes and flexible proboscis. Hallucigenia, once so strange that scientists had difficulty deciding which side was up. Wiwaxia, covered in scales and spines. These animals were not fantasy. They were real experiments in animal evolution. Some lineages survived, some disappeared forever. Some were early relatives of groups still alive today. Others were evolutionary branches that ended in extinction. Much of what we know comes from exceptional fossil sites, places where soft-bodied animals were preserved in unusual detail. The Burgess Shale in Canada, the Chengjiang Biota in China. Without these rare windows into deep time, many Cambrian animals would be almost invisible to us. Hard shells fossilize easily. Soft bodies usually vanish. But these sites preserved the hidden world of Cambrian life. Charles Darwin understood the problem before many of these fossils were known. In his time, the sudden appearance of complex Cambrian animals seemed like a challenge to gradual evolution. Darwin argued that the older fossil record was incomplete. Later discoveries proved that life did exist before the Cambrian, but the Cambrian still remains one of the greatest evolutionary turning points in Earth history. Charles Doolittle Walcott discovered the Burgess Shale in 1909, revealing a lost world of strange Cambrian animals. Later scientists such as Harry Whittington, Derek Briggs, Simon Conway Morris, Stephen Jay Gould, Douglas Irwin, Alison Daly, Jean Bernard Caron and Andrew Knoll helped humanity understand that the Cambrian was not a simple beginning. It was a radiation, a burst of diversity built on older foundations, a time when ecology, evolution, oxygen, skeletons, predation, and changing oceans all came together. No single cause explains it. The Cambrian transformation was not one switch, it was a convergence. More oxygen allowed more active life. Changing ocean chemistry supported skeleton formation. Predation drove an arms race. Developmental genes allowed more complex bodies. Burrowing changed the seafloor. Sea levels created broad, shallow habitats. Life was no longer merely surviving in the oceans. Life was changing the oceans, and the age of animals had truly begun. Section 2. The Ordovician oceans expand. After the Cambrian came the Ordovician period, from around 486.9 to 443.1 million years ago. Marine life entered another great expansion. The Cambrian had made animals abundant and visible. The Ordovician made marine ecosystems richer, broader, and more complex. This was the Great Ordovician biodiversification event. The oceans diversified on a massive scale. Brachiopods spread widely. Bryozoans expanded. Mollusks became more diverse. Cephalopods rose as important predators. Echinoderms multiplied. Corals began contributing to reef ecosystems. Graptolites drifted through the water column. Conodont animals left behind tiny tooth-like fossils. Trilobites continued evolving. Planktonic organisms became more important. The seafloor became crowded with filter feeders, grazers, predators, burrowers, and reef builders. Ordovician ecosystems were not simply Cambrian ecosystems continuing unchanged, they were becoming more layered, more specialized, more connected. Reefs began to resemble the great living structures that would later shape tropical seas. Suspension feeders filtered food from the water. Predators hunted through open marine habitats. Organisms occupied more ecological zones than before. The oceans were becoming dense networks of interaction. Several forces may have driven this expansion: cooling oceans, more stable chemical conditions, changing sea levels, continents breaking apart and creating new shallow seas, new nutrient flows, increasing ecological complexity. But as always in Earth history, expansion did not mean safety. The Ordovician ended with disaster. Around 443.1 million years ago, Earth experienced the first of the Big Five mass extinctions. The climate cooled rapidly. Ice sheets expanded across Gondwana. Sea levels fell. Shallow marine habitats disappeared. Organisms that had flourished in warm, shallow seas were suddenly stripped of their environments. Then, as conditions changed again, ocean oxygen levels and marine chemistry shifted, creating further stress. The End-Ordovician extinction was not the largest extinction in Earth history, but it was devastating. Marine ecosystems were deeply wounded. A world that had spent millions of years expanding life suddenly entered collapse. This would become a recurring pattern in Earth's story. Life expands. Ecosystems grow complex. Then climate, oceans, volcanism, impacts, or chemistry break the world apart. Extinction does not erase life, but it redirects it. Section 3. Life reaches the land. While the oceans changed, another revolution was beginning quietly on land. By around 475 to 470 million years ago, tiny plant-like organisms had established themselves outside the water. They were not forests. They were not flowering plants. They were not grasses. They were not trees. The earliest land plants were probably small, low-growing organisms, more like simple bryophyte-like plants than the plants that dominate Earth today. Their presence is known from microscopic spores called cryptospores. These spores were resistant, durable, protected by tough material. They allowed early plants to survive and reproduce in a world where drying out was one of the greatest threats. The colonization of land was not simple. In water, plants and algae were surrounded by support and moisture. On land, everything changed. They had to avoid dehydration. They had to support themselves without the buoyancy of water. They had to move water and nutrients through their bodies. They had to reproduce without being completely submerged. They had to survive ultraviolet radiation. They had to exchange gases while limiting water loss. The first land plants were small, but their impact would eventually be enormous. They helped form soil. They stabilized sediment. They increased rock weathering. They changed how rivers moved material. They altered carbon dioxide levels. They affected nutrient flow into the oceans. They created new habitats for animals. The land, once mostly barren rock, sediment, microbial crusts, and chemical surfaces, began turning into a living frontier. Plants did not do this alone. They likely formed partnerships with fungi and microorganisms, just as many modern plants depend on fungal networks to obtain nutrients. Life on land began as cooperation. Plant, fungus, microbe, water, rock, air, and sunlight. Scientists such as Jane Gray, Charles Wellman, Diane Edwards, Patricia Gensel, Paul Kenrick, and Peter Crane helped reveal the deep history of these early land plants and the transformation they began. From these small beginnings would eventually come vascular plants, roots, leaves, wood, seeds, forests, coal swamps, grasslands, and the terrestrial ecosystems that would one day support insects, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, primates, and humans. But at this moment, land life was still fragile, small, low to the ground, clinging to moisture. A quiet green beginning on a mostly hostile surface. Section 4. Arthropods step onto land. The first animals to establish themselves permanently on land were not vertebrates. They were arthropods. By the late Silurian and early Devonian, roughly 430 to 400 million years ago, small air-breathing arthropods were living on land. These early colonists likely included millipede-like myriapods, arachnids, and other small animals moving through moist habitats, microbial mats, and early plant-covered ground. For animals, land was a dangerous world. Water no longer supported the body. Air dried tissues out. Reproduction became more difficult. Breathing required new systems. Movement required limbs strong enough to support weight. Senses had to work in air instead of water. But arthropods had advantages. They already possessed external skeletons. Their jointed limbs allowed controlled movement. Some lineages evolved air-breathing structures, such as tracheae or book lungs. Their bodies could resist drying better than soft-bodied animals. One important fossil is Pneumodesmus pneumoni, a millipede-like creature with openings interpreted as spiracles for breathing air. Its exact age has been debated, but it stands as a symbol of one of the earliest air-breathing animals. The history of insects is more complicated. Early hexapods appeared during the Devonian, but the first true insects are harder to define. Fossils from the Rhynie chert, around 410 million years old, preserve springtails and other tiny terrestrial life forms. Springtails are hexapods, but not crown insects in the strictest sense. Winged insects would become abundant later, especially during the Carboniferous. But the foundations were already being built. The land was no longer only a place for plants and microbes. Animals were now walking there. Small animals, hidden animals, animals living among damp ground, early vegetation, and microbial communities. The first terrestrial ecosystems were beginning to form. Plants changed the land, arthropods moved into it, and the stage was being prepared for vertebrates to follow. Section 5. Fish approach the land. Between roughly 390 and 360 million years ago, one of the most important transitions in vertebrate history unfolded, the movement from water toward land. But it was not a single fish crawling onto shore and becoming an amphibian. It was not a straight line. It was a long evolutionary transition among lobe-finned fishes closely related to the first four-limbed vertebrates. These animals are called tetrapodomorph fishes. They were fish, but some had features that pointed toward the tetrapod body plan. Strong internal fin bones, flattened heads, stronger ribs, shallower water adaptations, changes in breathing, changes in feeding, changes in the connection between skull, shoulder and body. Important forms include Eusthenopteron, Panderichthys, Tiktaalik, Acanthostega, Ichthyostega and Chulurpeton. Each one reveals a piece of the transition. One of the most famous is Tiktaalik rosei. Tiktaalik lived around 375 million years ago in what is now the Canadian Arctic. It was discovered by a team including Neil Shubin, Edward Deichler, and Farish Jenkins. Tiktaalik was not a true four-limbed land animal. It was a fish. It had scales, it had fins, it had fin rays, it had gills, it had aquatic feeding structures, but it also had traits that looked forward: a mobile neck, a flattened head, strong ribs, a shoulder separated from the skull, robust fin bones corresponding to the upper arm, forearm and wrist region. Its fins may have supported some of its weight in shallow water. This was an animal living near the boundary between worlds, not fully terrestrial, not simply a typical fish, a creature of shallow water, mudflats, channels, vegetation and unstable substrates. The first limbs may not have evolved for walking across dry land. They may have evolved for moving through shallow water, pushing through vegetation, lifting the body, or stabilizing movement in complex aquatic environments. Later, those same structures became useful on land. This is how evolution often works. A feature evolves in one context, then becomes powerful in another. Possible tetrapod trackways from Poland and Ireland may be older than Tiktaalik, reaching back around 390 to 385 million years ago. If correct, they suggest that tetrapod-like animals existed earlier than many body fossils show. Scientists such as Jenny Clack, Per Ahlberg, Grzegorz Niedźwiecki, John Long, Neil Shubin, Edward Deichler and Farish Jenkins helped transform our understanding of this transition. The fish-to-tetrapod transition was not the conquest of land in one heroic leap. It was a slow crossing. A world of fins becoming limbs, gills and lungs, water and air, mud and shore. The vertebrate body was being reshaped, and one day that reshaping would make amphibians, reptiles, dinosaurs, birds, mammals and humans possible. Section 6. The Late Devonian Crisis. The Devonian is often called the age of fishes, but it was also an age of instability. Around 372 to 359 million years ago, Earth experienced a series of extinction episodes known collectively as the Late Devonian Extinctions. These were not a single clean disaster. They were prolonged crises. Marine ecosystems suffered heavily. Reefs collapsed. Many armoured fishes declined. Trilobites were reduced. Shallow marine systems were disrupted. The causes are still studied, but several forces appear important: ocean anoxia, climate change, nutrient disruption, volcanism, changes in sea level, expansion of land plants altering erosion and nutrient flow. As plants spread on land, they change soils and weathering. Nutrients washed into the seas. This may have contributed to algal blooms, oxygen loss, and stressed marine environments. Life on land was expanding, but that expansion may have disrupted life in the oceans. The Late Devonian Crisis reminds us that evolution is never isolated. A change on land can affect the sea. A change in plants can affect animals. A change in oxygen can restructure ecosystems. Earth is a system, and life is one of the forces that changes it. Section 7. The amniotic egg. After vertebrates moved into shallow water and onto land, a new problem remained: reproduction. Amphibian-like animals still depended heavily on water. Their eggs were vulnerable to drying out. Their reproduction often required ponds, streams, or wet environments. Then came one of the most important innovations in vertebrate history: the amniotic reproductive system. Traditionally, the earliest body fossils of crown amniotes are placed around 320 to 315 million years ago during the Carboniferous period. Some recently reported trackways may suggest an even earlier origin, perhaps around 359 to 354 million years ago, but that evidence still needs continued testing. The key point is this: amniotes could reproduce away from open water. The amniotic egg contained specialized membranes. The amnion surrounded the embryo in protective fluid. The chorion helped with gas exchange. The allantois stored waste and assisted respiration. The yolk sac supplied nutrients. Combined with internal fertilization, this system allowed vertebrates to lay eggs on land or carry embryos internally without needing to deposit eggs directly in ponds or streams. The first amniotic eggs were not necessarily hard like modern chicken eggs. They may have been soft or leathery, but they changed everything. The amniote lineage split into two great branches: synapsids, which would eventually produce mammals; sauropsids, which would produce reptiles, dinosaurs, and birds. This was the beginning of a deeper independence from water. Amphibian-like animals still remained tied to wet environments, but amniotes could spread into drier habitats. They could move farther from streams and ponds. They could colonize new environments. The amniotic egg was not just a reproductive structure. It was a passport into the land. Section 8. The Great Dying. For tens of millions of years, life continued diversifying. Forests expanded. Insects grew more abundant. Amphibians and early amniotes spread. Synapsids and reptiles evolved into many forms. But around 251.9 million years ago, Earth faced the greatest biological crisis in its known history: the Permian-Triassic mass extinction, the Great Dying. This was the most severe mass extinction of the Phanerozoic eon. The large majority of marine species disappeared. Terrestrial ecosystems were devastated. Forests collapsed. Food webs broke apart. Life came closer to total ruin than at any other known point in the history of complex organisms. The main trigger was probably the Siberian Traps volcanic episode. In what is now Siberia, enormous volumes of magma erupted and intruded into sedimentary rocks rich in carbon and other volatile materials. This released vast quantities of carbon dioxide, methane, sulfur compounds, metals, and aerosols. The planet warmed drastically. Oceans acidified. Oxygen vanished from large areas of seawater. Anoxic and toxic euxinic waters expanded. Nutrient cycles broke down. Forests died. Erosion increased. Climate became unstable. Rainfall patterns shifted. Heat intensified. Some research suggests that extreme and persistent El Niño-like conditions may have amplified tropical heat and ecological collapse. This was not a simple extinction. It was a planetary cascade. Volcanism changed the atmosphere. The atmosphere changed the climate. The climate changed the oceans. The oceans lost oxygen. Ecosystems collapsed. Life suffered on land and in the sea. Scientists such as Douglas Irwin, Paul Wignall, Shen Shuzhong, Seth Burgess, Benjamin Black, Linda Elkins-Tanton, and Yadong Sun have helped uncover the scale and causes of this catastrophe. Recovery was slow. The early Triassic was unstable. Ecosystems did not simply bounce back. The world after the Great Dying was wounded, hot, and biologically reorganized. But extinction also opens space, not fairly, not gently, not with purpose. But when dominant groups disappear, survivors expand into the empty roles they leave behind. And in the world after the Permian disaster, new lineages would rise. Among them were the ancestors and competitors of dinosaurs and mammals. Section 9. Dinosaurs appear. Dinosaurs did not appear in a world made for them. They emerged into a crowded Triassic planet filled with many other powerful groups. The earliest unambiguous dinosaurs appeared around 233 million years ago. They were not yet the giants of later ages. Many early dinosaurs were relatively small, lightly built, and only one part of diverse ecosystems. Early forms included animals such as Eoraptor, Herrerasaurus, Bureolestes, and early relatives of the major dinosaur branches. They lived alongside crocodile-line archosaurs, large amphibians, therapsids, rhynchosaurs, other reptiles. The Triassic was not yet the age of dinosaur dominance. It was a world of competition. Dinosaurs had advantages, but they did not immediately take over. Their rise occurred in stages. Around 234 to 232 million years ago, the Carnian pluvial episode brought major climatic and ecological disruption. Rainfall patterns changed, environments shifted, ecosystems were disturbed. This may have encouraged dinosaur diversification. Then came another turning point. Around 201.4 million years ago, the End-Triassic mass extinction struck. This extinction was associated with massive volcanism from the Central Atlantic magmatic province as the supercontinent Pangaea began to split apart. Volcanic gases altered the climate. Warming increased. Ocean acidification and oxygen loss stressed marine life. Many competing terrestrial groups disappeared. After the extinction, dinosaurs expanded dramatically. During the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, they became the dominant large land vertebrates. The world of giant sauropods, armored stegosaurs, horned ceratopsians, duck-billed hadrosaurs, and terrifying theropod predators grew out of the openings left by extinction. The name Dinosauria was created in 1842 by British anatomist Richard Owen. He recognized similarities among Megalosaurus, Iguanodon, and Hylaeosaurus. His reconstructions were imperfect, but the name gave science a new category: the terrible lizards, dinosaurs. Other early figures, such as William Buckland and Gideon Mantell, helped reveal the first dinosaur fossils. Later, Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope uncovered many more during the famous fossil rush known as the Bone Wars. Modern scientists such as Paul Sereno, Max Langer, Sterling Nesbitt, and Steve Brusata have continued refining the story of dinosaur origins and evolution. Dinosaurs were not an accident of size. They were products of survival, extinction, adaptation, and opportunity. They rose because Earth changed, and they were ready when the world opened. Section 10. Mammals in the shadow of dinosaurs. While dinosaurs rose, another lineage was evolving beside them: mammals. Or more accurately at first, mammalia forms. Mammals did not appear after dinosaurs vanished. They lived alongside dinosaurs for more than 100 million years. Their ancestors came from the synapsid branch of amniotes, the same broad lineage that had split away from the reptile line long before. By around 225 to 195 million years ago, early mammalia forms were present. Animals such as Morganucodon appeared near the Triassic-Jurassic transition. Hadrocodium, around 195 million years old, showed an expanded brain case and more separated middle ear bones. Mammalian traits did not appear all at once. They evolved gradually: specialized teeth, stronger chewing systems, more advanced jaw joints, enlarged brain regions, endothermic physiology, hair, milk production, sensitive hearing, middle ear bones separating from the jaw. These changes unfolded over long spans of time. For years, the old image was simple. Mesozoic mammals were tiny nocturnal insect eaters hiding under dinosaur feet. But that image is outdated. Many were small, yes, but they were also diverse. Some climbed, some burrowed, some swam, some glided, some ate insects, some ate plants, some were predators, some had unusual teeth and jaws, some grew large enough to attack or consume small dinosaurs. One extraordinary fossil even preserves a mammal apparently locked in combat with a dinosaur. Mammals did not wait passively for the dinosaurs to disappear. They were already experimenting, already diversifying, already building the biological toolkit that would later allow them to expand after catastrophe. Researchers such as William King Gregory, George Gaylord Simpson, Alfred Sherwood Romer, J.C. Luo, Farish Jenkins, Guillermo Rougier, and Jin Meng helped illuminate the deep origins of mammals and their relatives. The mammals of the dinosaur age were not the rulers of the land, but they were survivors, and survival would matter. Section 11. Birds become dinosaurs that fly. During the Jurassic, another transformation unfolded within the dinosaur lineage itself. Birds evolved from theropod dinosaurs. This does not mean birds evolved from animals that merely resembled dinosaurs. Birds are dinosaurs. They are the surviving branch of the dinosaur tree. By around 160 to 150 million years ago, bird-line theropods had developed feathered wings and forms of aerial locomotion. Feathers had evolved before true bird flight. They were not originally only for flying. Non-avian dinosaurs used feathers for insulation, display, camouflage, egg protection, and possibly maneuvering, running, or climbing. Over time, some feathered theropods developed wings capable of controlled aerial movement. One of the most famous fossils is Archaeopteryx. Archaeopteryx lived around 150 million years ago in late Jurassic Germany. It had flight feathers, feathered wings, a wishbone, lightweight bones, an aerodynamic body covering, but it also had teeth, 3 clawed fingers, a long bony tail, abdominal ribs, and several primitive dinosaurian features. It was a mosaic, part bird-like, part clearly dinosaurian. Its wing structure suggests it could perform active flapping flight, though not like most modern birds. Calling Archaeopteryx the first bird is useful as shorthand, but it is not exact. The bird lineage probably began earlier, and other feathered Paravian dinosaurs lived close to the bird-dinosaur transition. The origin of birds was not one fossil. It was a branching evolutionary process. Thomas Henry Huxley recognized the close relationship between birds and dinosaurs in the 19th century. In the 20th century, John Ostrom revived and strengthened the dinosaur-bird connection through his work on Deinonychus and Archaeopteryx. Later scientists including Jacques Gautier, Xu Xing, Julia Clark, Zhonghe Zhou, and Jingmai O'Connor helped establish that birds are living theropod dinosaurs. This means dinosaurs never fully vanished. The non-avian dinosaurs would one day disappear, but birds survived. Every sparrow, every eagle, every crow, every chicken, every ostrich, every bird alive today is a living dinosaur. Section 12. The Asteroid and the End of the Dinosaurs. 66 million years ago, the world changed in a single catastrophic moment. A massive asteroid, roughly 10 to 15 kilometers wide, struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact carved out the Chicxulub crater. The energy release was beyond imagination. Earthquakes shook the planet. Tsunamis surged across seas. Rock vaporized. Debris blasted into the atmosphere. Thermal radiation spread. Fires ignited. Dust, soot, and vaporized material rose into the sky. Sunlight was blocked, the surface cooled, photosynthesis collapsed, food webs broke apart. This was the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction, the KPG extinction. It eliminated roughly 3/4 of species. All non-avian dinosaurs disappeared. Pterosaurs vanished. Ammonites died out. Many marine reptiles disappeared. Many plankton groups collapsed. Many bird and mammal lineages were lost, but birds survived. So not all dinosaurs died, only the non-avian dinosaurs disappeared. The discovery of this event changed science. In 1980, Luis Alvarez, Walter Alvarez, Frank Asaro, and Helen Michel reported an unusual iridium-rich layer at the KPG boundary. Iridium is rare in Earth's crust, but more common in meteorites. They proposed that a giant extraterrestrial impact caused the extinction. At first, the idea was controversial. Then evidence accumulated. Shocked quartz, impact glass, spherules, global ejecta layers, and finally the buried Chicxulub crater. Researchers such as Jan Smit, Glenn Penfield, Alan Hildebrand, Joanna Morgan, and Sean Gulick helped build the modern understanding of the impact and its consequences. Large-scale Deccan volcanism was also occurring around this time and affected climate. But the Chicxulub impact remains the principal cause of the abrupt global extinction at the boundary. It was one of the most important moments in the history of life, not because it ended life, but because it changed which survivors inherited the future. Section 13. Mammals rise after the impact. After the KPG extinction, the world was damaged. Forests had burned. Food webs had collapsed. Many large animals were gone. The skies and seas were changed, but surviving mammals endured. They had already existed for more than 100 million years. They had already developed diverse diets and lifestyles. And when the non-avian dinosaurs disappeared, many ecological roles opened. During the Paleocene, from around 66 to 56 million years ago, mammals expanded rapidly. They increased in body size. They diversified in diet. They explored new forms of movement. They spread geographically. They became more ecologically varied. Some became herbivores. Some became predators. Some climbed. Some dug. Some ran. Some adapted to trees. Some moved toward water. The Corral Bluffs fossil record in Colorado shows that mammalian body size and ecosystem diversity began expanding within the first million years after the extinction. Some communities recovered within tens or hundreds of thousands of years, but full ecological recovery took much longer. Mammals did not instantly become modern. Their brains did not immediately expand first. Research suggests that body size increased before major relative brain expansion in some placental mammals. The early post-extinction world rewarded survival, flexibility, and ecological opportunity. Mammals had inherited a changed planet, not because they were destined to rule, but because they survived the collapse. Extinction opened the door. Evolution walked through it. Section 14. Primates in the forests. Around 56 million years ago, Earth entered another warm interval, the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. Global temperatures rose. Warm forests expanded. High-latitude regions became more hospitable. In this greenhouse world, early true primates spread through forests across Asia, Europe, and North America. Possible primate relatives had existed earlier, but the earliest generally accepted true primates appear near the beginning of the Eocene. These early primates had adaptations that would become important for life in trees. Grasping hands and feet, nails instead of claws in many forms, forward-facing eyes, improved depth perception, agile movement through branches. early Eocene primates included broad groups such as adapiforms and oomyforms. Adapiforms are often compared with lemur-like primates. Oomyforms are often compared with tarsier-like primates, but these comparisons are not direct ancestry. They are general anatomical similarities. Evolution was branching. Many early primate lineages vanished. Some survived longer. Some gave rise to later groups. By around 45 million years ago, undisputed early anthropoids were present in Asia and Africa. Anthropoids are the larger lineage that would eventually include monkeys, apes, and humans. The early history of anthropoids remains complex. Some evidence suggests an Asian origin followed by dispersal into Africa. Other fossils show early diversity in African lineages. Scientists such as Elwyn Simons, Philip Gingerich, Kenneth Rose, Thierry Smith, Christopher Beard, Eric Seifert, and Jean-Jacques Jaeger have helped uncover this deep primate history. But this was not a march toward humans. Most primates were not human ancestors. They were their own branches, their own experiments, their own survivors and extinctions. Primates evolved in forests shaped by climate, fruit, insects, branches, predators, and competition. The traits that would one day matter for humans began as adaptations for living in trees: hands for grasping, eyes for judging distance, brains for movement, social behavior, and sensory processing. The roots of humanity were forming, but humans were still far in the future. Section 15. The first hominin lineage. Around 7 to 6 million years ago, another branching event began in Africa. The lineages that would eventually produce humans, chimpanzees, and bonobos separated from ancestral ape populations. This does not mean humans evolved from modern chimpanzees. Modern chimpanzees did not exist yet. Modern humans did not exist yet. Instead, an ancestral African ape population gradually split into separate lineages. One lineage would eventually lead to chimpanzees and bonobos. Another would eventually lead to humans. This was not a single moment. Speciation is a population process. It happens across generations. Groups become separated. Genes flow less often. Adaptations diverge. Different populations follow different evolutionary paths. Even genomes can carry complicated histories because different regions of DNA may trace back through slightly different ancestral patterns. Possible early hominins include Sahelanthropus chadensis, around 7 to 6 million years old, Aurorin tugenensis, around 6 million years old, and Ardipithecus cadabra, around 5.8 to 5.2 million years old. Sahelanthropus is especially important because it lived close to the estimated divergence between the human and chimpanzee lineages. Its fossils show a mixture of ape-like and possible hominin features. Its classification remains debated. Some evidence from its skull and limb bones suggests possible adaptations for bipedalism, but the fossils are fragmentary, and scientists continue to test where it belongs. Researchers such as Michel Brunet, Brigitte Segnut, Martin Pickford, Johannes Haile Selassie, Tim White, David Pilbeam, Carol Ward, and Sergio Almesiher have helped reveal the early history of the hominin line. This was not yet humanity. No tools like later Stone Age industries, no cities, no language recorded in symbols, no agriculture, no civilization. But something had begun. An ape lineage in Africa was taking a different path, a path that would eventually lead to upright walking. Hands freed from constant locomotion, changing teeth, changing bodies, expanding brains, stone tools, fire, migration, culture, and after millions more years, Homo sapiens. Section 16. The Big Five and the Shape of Life. Across this long age, life was shaped not only by evolution, but by catastrophe. The Big Five mass extinctions were not identical disasters. Each one struck the biosphere in different ways. The End Ordovician extinction, around 443.1 million years ago, was driven by cooling, glaciation, falling sea level, and ocean disruption. The late Devonian extinctions, with major crises around 372 million years ago, involved prolonged oxygen loss in the oceans, climate change, nutrient disruption, and possibly volcanism. The end Permian extinction, around 251.9 million years ago, was driven by Siberian traps volcanism, extreme greenhouse warming, ocean acidification, oxygen loss, and ecological collapse. The End-Triassic extinction, around 201.4 million years ago, was linked to Central Atlantic magmatic province volcanism, warming, acidification, and ocean anoxia. The Chicxulub extinction, 66 million years ago, was driven by the Chicxulub asteroid impact. These extinctions were not side stories. They were engines of redirection. They destroyed. They erased. They ended dominant groups. But they also opened ecological space. After extinction, the world did not restart. It reorganized. The survivors inherited the ruins. The course of life changed again and again. Without the end Permian extinction, the Triassic world would have been different. Without the End-Triassic extinction, dinosaurs might never have become dominant. Without the KPG extinction, mammals might never have expanded the way they did. Without countless smaller extinctions and environmental shifts, primates and hominins might never have evolved. Life's history was not a ladder. It was a battlefield of adaptation, collapse, survival, and chance. Section 17. Closing. The Road Toward Humanity. From 538.8 million years ago to around 7 million years ago, Earth changed beyond recognition. The Cambrian seas filled with predators, burrowers, swimmers, and skeleton-building animals. The Ordovician oceans expanded into complex marine ecosystems. Plants began colonizing land. Arthropods followed. Fish evolved toward limbs. Tetrapods emerged. The amniotic egg freed vertebrates from direct dependence on open water for reproduction. Mass extinctions shattered ecosystems. Dinosaurs rose after disaster. Mammals evolved in their shadow. Birds emerged from feathered theropod dinosaurs. An asteroid ended the reign of the non-avian dinosaurs. Mammals expanded into the emptied world. Primates spread through warm forests. And in Africa, around 7 to 6 million years ago, the lineage that would eventually lead to humans separated from the lineage that would lead to chimpanzees and bonobos. This story was not planned. It was not aimed at humanity from the beginning. Evolution does not know the future. It does not move toward a final goal. It responds to the present, to climate, to predators, to oxygen, to food, to extinction, to geography, to chance. Every living thing is the product of survival through uncertainty. The animals of the Cambrian did not know they were beginning the age of animals. The first land plants did not know they were preparing the continents for forests. Tiktaalik did not know its fins pointed toward limbs. The first amniotes did not know their descendants would include reptiles, birds, mammals, and humans. The dinosaurs did not know their lineage would survive as birds. The small mammals of the Mesozoic did not know an asteroid would open the world. The early primates did not know one branch of their distant descendants would look up at the stars and reconstruct the story. But that is what happened. Life moved forward without a script. Through extinction and recovery, through accident and adaptation, through catastrophe and opportunity. The world we know was not inevitable. It was one possible outcome among countless paths. And by 7 million years ago, after 500 million years of animal evolution, the stage was finally set for the next great chapter. The rise of the hominin lineage, the long road toward humanity.